said they want to build the inside. Tackle. So the place we did last time, we didn't plan on the time or the day. So that's the last thing we did before we went.
All right.
And if we had just done a mile and a half, we would have had a little bit better. And we didn't. Yeah, for the fall. The problem is, I can't decide what boots I want. If I want to go with boots, that's all right.
But no, they're not shutting up part. Because most people say a little bit, be done. First time I went in there, I was like, okay. Really? It's not so bad. And then we do the drive-through sometimes now. But the thing about the drive-through, you get the drive-through.
Okay, tell her I said hi.
And watch, children's news or whatever while we're working from home, so it's like, I don't know, I gotta figure it out. I think we probably eat there as much as we eat at Congress.
Monique, are we good?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, good afternoon. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. There's other things you could have been doing, but you decided to hang out with us tonight, so that's good. We appreciate you being here. Let me move down to item B, which is roll call. And let the roll show Councilmember Gaynor will not be here. He's on holiday today. Councilmember Beckles had minor surgery, and she will not be here today. And I know that HIPAA rules, she gave me permission to say that. All right, let's move down to comments from our citizens. So we'll give you the opportunity to speak. Citizens, if you have something that you want to bring to council at this time, would you come to the podium, give your name and your address, and we'll allow you to speak at this time.
I'm Tixie Fowler at 37 North Barton, and I am wearing my hat this evening as the chairman of Parks, Green Spaces, and Trails Commission. And I just know that council is and mayor are very eager to know what's going on with the Rossi Brundage project. So I just want to let you know that PG&T met on March 17th, which was right after our last meeting. We identified 2 task force made up of citizens in addition to the board members. There are 5 adults and there are 9 teenagers from Norcross High School, Paul Duke High School, and Summer Middle School. I assigned them basically to answer the question, how to keep basketball in Norcross while addressing community safety concerns. They were tasked to focus on research, a short-term recommendation for a solution, and a long-term recommendation. And the teens have come up with an idea. They have reached out to the chief of police and also Mike Jones with Park Superintendent. And they have a Zoom meeting with the chief to share their idea on Thursday of this week. At that point, depending on how that meeting goes, the plan is to have the teens present their idea to council for the short-term solution at the next work session like this. So, there you let you know.
Thank you. Appreciate your hard work. And the hard work of the team, of course. Let's move down to, unless there are any other comments.
My name is Joe Beach. I live at 2910 Queens Court, and that's Farmington Hills. Several people in our neighborhood have called the city because of the trees that have been cut down on either side of our neighborhood on Holcomb Ridge Road. Several trees fell in a storm last winter, I guess, and they were cut up to get them off the road, and they're still there on the side of the road. That's on the south side of Holcomb Ridge Road at Queens Court. On the east side of Queens Court, on the north side of the road, some other trees were cut down, and they were just thrown down in the creek. And several people in our neighborhood have called the city, and so far that's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. So I just want to make you aware of it. I know none of you get out and move trees, but just want to let you know. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. We'll relay those to our city manager to address the situation. Any other comments from any of our citizens that like to speak this time? Last call. Okay, having heard none, we'll move down to, normally we have comments on the council, but this is a special call. At our last meeting, there were several issues that we covered. We didn't have enough time to cover the entire agenda. Council, at this particular time, Chair will allow any reiteration or discussion from the previous meeting if you have anything you'd like to bring at this time.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I know we don't have, we don't have Tracy here tonight, and so I apologize for bringing this up without her here, but I just wanted to go back to the Norcross Housing Authority item that we talked about at our last meeting that's coming up for us to vote on, and it's in the PRD zoning, and what the Housing Authority has partnered with Walton Homes, I believe it is, to build an apartment complex off of Mitchell. And just in sort of absorbing what was said at our last meeting, I'm really struggling with the, thank you for bringing that up, I mean, so on the planning and zoning recommendation number 3, it says that the property shall include a 20-foot setback along Mitchell Road, which is not that far. I mean, 20 feet off of a main road like Mitchell is really close. And then further down here, it actually says that the sidewalk in there is 8 foot, not 10 foot. There had been, it says here in item number 8, a 2-foot landscape strip, 8-foot sidewalk, and a 10-foot landscape strip shall be along Mitchell. And I thought we were talking about a 10-foot sidewalk, but that's not really what I'm frustrated about. What I'm frustrated about is this 10-foot setback along the interior property lines. They're supposed to be, it says there's a 10-foot landscape strip shall be provided within the 10-foot setback along the interior property lines, and a 10-foot landscape strip, I mean, barely will hold anything. And so I just feel like this property is being, like the housing units that are going to be placed on this property are going to be squished in there, and the quality of life is not going to be great. And we get to determine on some level what quality of life looks like. And in my opinion, you know, there could be a part of us there. Norcross is a big city, and certainly there's parts that are more industrialized or more in one stage of development than another. And because this is down off of Mitchell, it could be, we could feel like anything is an improvement to what's going on down there. But I think that this is our one opportunity to determine quality of life. I'm thrilled that they're redoing the housing stock down there, but I just am majorly against only a 10-foot setback when there's supposed to be landscaping inside of that and quality of life. So that was the main thing that I wanted to bring up. And I had been talking with Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Myers before this, and he had said something about how high the buildings were supposed to be. Well, I have a problem with them going higher, but I don't really see anything in here that talks about the height of the buildings. And I would have my microphone on, but there's no light on it, so I don't know what's going on with it.
Okay, I'll put it up like this, Judge.
So now it's blinking green, that should be good, right?
Yeah, you have to re-say all of that now.
Okay, I'm very frustrated about a 10-foot setback. I don't think it delivers good quality of life. And I think we should at least have a 10-foot sidewalk along Mitchell, and the building should be further back than 20 feet. That's just not the kind of development that's down there, is super high density, 20 foot off a busy road. I'm thrilled about redoing the housing stock down there, but Walton Homes is a for-profit enterprise. This is for-profit. They're partnering with the Federal Housing Authority, but they are for profit. And so we get to be the folks that put the curbs on quality of life, and I think that we should. That's basically what I got to say.
Certainly appreciate those comments. Now, of course, we won't be voting on this tonight, but for the record, your comments have been duly noted. At our next session, regular session, is when we'll actually have the vote, and additional comments can be made at that time. So thank you. Any other comments from council?
General comments, or is it only about items on our previous agenda?
General comments or
Okay.
previous agenda? It's
Thank you
your
for
pleasure.
that. To what Ms. Fowler said, I continue, almost daily get requests from young adults in our community, or for teenagers in our community to play basketball. The government unilaterally decided to take the basketball rooms down. They unilaterally decided to put them back up, and they unilaterally decided to take them back down again. The process that we're going through is overly cumbersome. We just need to put one room back up. These kids are, every day I'm fielding questions from kids, a lot of them at the same time, over and over and over again. But it seems that if the government could take them down numerous times and put them up, then maybe the government can respond to what the next process should be. Are we held to a board's recommendation? Are we gonna be able to act on this board's recommendation, or how will the government respond to this? You're the government.
I'm the government, apparently.
Well, we're the people's representation to
Yeah,
the government.
I think the key here is, my predecessor, for public safety took them down, at a later point in time, put them back up. What we discovered through that process was that an issue that had been present in the community for some period of time went away when the hoops came down, came back when the hoops went up. After discussion with the chief several months ago, I made the decision to take them down, and that was after the second incident of firearms being used in about a 1-year period. I will tell you that if I think I can take them down, then obviously I think I can put them back. But we brought you a proposal, and at that point, 2 proposals actually. Council asked for some additional information, making it a larger project, replacing the asphalt. We brought that back, and at that point, council decided to turn this over to the Parks, Green Space and Trails Commission. And I talked to the chair earlier today and basically said that I really, in my perspective, it would be inappropriate for me to overstep what council directed that commission to do on your behalf by going there.
I'm not sure
putting them
council
up.
directed that organization, and council's here to discuss it, but to unilaterally shut off a portion of a park while we go through a process of capital expenditure.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting question after question about putting one rim back up so young kids can play basketball.
Well, and it would be,
And as the only person besides Mr. Myers that play basketball there, maybe in this room,
yeah,
I think that there is a benefit to having basketball rim there.
sure.
Maybe, I'm sure the mayor plays there.
Yes.
Well, that gives me reference.
Well, I was talking to a couple of young men there.
We're policymakers, and we did not set a policy to have or remove a
That's true,
basketball goal.
that's true, and you could set a policy, and I would implement your policy, but.
So you
this-
will keep it down under your purview until you feel this process has been met? Has been terminated?
Well, we were trying to move forward with a project, and I think in respect to what this council gave as direction, I think I'd be undermining the Parks, Green Space, and Trails Commission by unilaterally doing something. I did talk to, she's hiding back there, but she's still here. What what I suggested today is that actually we look at putting a goal up and getting additional data. We know, we actually have data. I mean, we know that when the hoops came down, that the concerns at the park went away. When hoops came back, they came back. I took them down after the shooting. The concerns that the neighbors had expressed went away. As I started to say, I was out there a couple weeks ago, talked to a couple of young men that were out there exercising in the area, asked them for suggestions, and, you know, from that discussion, I felt that the next step might be to put one up and see. If the issue doesn't reemerge, then I think they have data. The other data that I know we have is that at the time that we had concerns, we had 3 license plate readers in that park. And it showed that the majority of the people there at the time that we had a problem were from out of Gwinnett County. So it wasn't residents that were creating concerns for residents that live around the park. It was people coming in. And not entirely, you know, we don't have the data to suggest to everyone there. But we had a problem with people coming in from outside our community. But personally, you know, I think putting one up would give some additional data, because if nothing happens, then the issue was a full court basketball court.
I think I said this last time. I've spent a lot of time out there. The aggressiveness that people have complained about culminating in a discharging of a firearm was directly related to, one, COVID and other courts being shut down, and the new type of, the age change of the people that play basketball there. Because we have people coming in from everywhere else looking, because they wanted to run a full court, which you've heard me say, run it full. And because of that, the kids can't play. Have you ever watched basketball out there? There's kids shooting on the side ones, and then the grown men come and take up the court, and then the other kids go and play on the side to side, and it's just this back and forth, back and forth. We don't want to eliminate the kids playing on the sides, but we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and we refuse to put one rim back up. It's asinine. We're a hammer looking for a nail here. So I'm gonna start forwarding the calls and requests that I get to the rest of this council. When you have a teenager asking, how many of those teenagers did you get, Ms. Fowler, that actually play basketball there?
Am I allowed to speak?
That's the mayor.
Well, actually, no.
Okay, so,
because-
This is not.
okay, well, I'll talk to her afterwards, but
Is there an issue?
when I'm getting
Well,
people calling
Let-
me.
let me-
I'm comfortable with your forwarding any complaints to me.
Okay.
Uh,
When I have kids
Mike?
coming up to me and saying, I'm 14, I play basketball at Russell Rogers Park, and I don't own a gun, how am I supposed to answer them? I think this is something we need to start
Well,
being a little more
one thing-
serious about.
one
Since
thing
you-
I just said,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
Did you
This is
say,
not supposed to be-
did you just ask if we should believe them?
can
No,
I make a suggestion?
Comments from the audience are closed at this time.
Can I make a suggestion? We've got 3 council people here. What I'd be interested in knowing is, is there consensus amongst the 3 council members here to put something onto our agenda at our next meeting that just authorizes a single goal? Because I don't want to put the city manager into a tight spot. He's trying to follow the process that we put into place.
No, we did not put it in place like that. We said investigate capital expenditure. So all I'm trying to do is, I don't want to circumvent the process. I'm just saying, what's wrong with putting one rim back up, and not even on the main court, the side rim, so they can't even run full court?
But 3 council members can do that. So let's put it onto the
Put it on the
April
agenda.
meeting, and let's see if 3 council
Ms.
members can
Bowers'
support it.
Report out should be available by then anyway, so we'll be able to give direction.
Is that okay, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Actually, administratively, the city manager can do that with consensus from the council. But if you want to put it on the agenda for a vote and go through a formal process, you certainly can.
Seeing as we don't have 2 council members here tonight, I'd feel more comfortable with that.
I'm fine, just put it on the next agenda. It's in a couple of days.
Right.
Okay?
I just think we need to decide as a council whether or not we're gonna go through a process and remove a part of, if we're gonna allow administrative, no offense, to remove an aspect of our part without a policy decision being made. We need to be on the record about policy. This is a policy decision that's been taken out of our hands.
Right, but there was a time issue in terms of making sure that we were taking care of our community and removing a dangerous environment.
They're allowed to
Right.
unilaterally do that, but I think we all agree that timing may have, and if it's something, if if we put it up next week and there's a shooting, by all means, we don't have to wait 2 weeks for a meeting. The city manager's able to do that.
All right.
Yeah. Well, if there was a shooting after we put it up, we'd all be in a lot of trouble, just frankly.
Any other comments? Thank you, Andrew, for bringing that.
I'll make sure that everyone gets comments from my 14-year-olds that go to my church that surely do not have a gun, even if the gentleman thinks they do.
Yes. I understand. Okay, any other items from the council at this time? Okay, we will move down to item E, which is comprehensive electric inventory. Steve, that one's yours.
Good evening. I am presenting the comprehensive inventory for the City of Norcross electrical system, which is basically involves poles, wire, apparatus, transformers, overhead, underground, really all of it, to be able to be populated on a map so that we can use that information for a system study that I would present in probably the next 6 to 8 months. It's pretty basic. It includes lighting. Let's see. Let's see. The existing data hub, which I guess I don't know if I can ask IT. They said we have an ArcGIS data hub. Is that accurate? Okay, so we could use that already. So that would be a way we could look up the information, and it'd be just good to have on a daily basis, especially if we're trying to order material in the future. So it's pretty basic, and that's what we're asking to move forward with.
Okay, I'm sure council's read over the information. Council, do we have any questions?
We can move this to our voting meeting.
Yes.
I've got something real quick.
Go ahead.
I would just say thank you, Mary Beth, for making sure that this information is, that we've got what we need to be able to move forward.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate that. Let's move to item 2, speed and traffic calming measures, studies, updating selected city roadways. Matthew, that was yours.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present item 22-6432, which is addresses the speed and traffic calming measures on some of our selected roadways. This is a couple studies that were performed by a couple of our on-call professionals to look into some items that were noticed last maybe 2 or 5 years with Chief Grogan as well. The main issues that were triggering the studies was the feasibility of lowering the speed limits on some of these selected roadways, the possible implementation of some traffic calming measures, and some pedestrian connectivity, especially along North Peachtree Street. The speed limit study focused on 3 roadways. The first one, this was done by QK4, that focused on Holcomb Bridge Road and South Peachtree Street, as well as North Peachtree Street. I'm just going to go through them through these roads very quick. Holcomb Bridge Road extends from Peachtree Industrial all the way to West Peachtree Street, and the majority of that segment is at 35 mile per hour. There's that small section which is right after the vertical curve or the horizontal curve after the church that actually changes to 25 mile per hour heading into town. The second street is North Peachtree Street, and mainly the entire segment or the studied segment is at a 30 mile per hour speed limit. The third street is South Peachtree Street, and the entire segment is at a 35 mile per hour, including going from Jones Road all the way to Jimmy Carter Boulevard. All these three streets are classified according to the Federal Highway Administration as an urban arterial road. This is the data that was collected. The circle with the letter in it is the collection or the data, the station that was the data was collected at. So we got two along each segment. And just a couple things to notice is that the mean average or the mean speed along these entire segments are as shown, and they're actually within the posted speed limit. The 85th percentile, which is the speed at which 85% of the traveler or the road users actually use, is at or below the speed limit, is actually shown as shown. That's actually most of them are actually within 4 mile per hour above the posted speed limit. The entire study shows the data and the collection and what type of methodology that were used in estimating these recommended speed limits. This shows the recommendation from the consultant as far as what needs to be changed. But I'll just skip this and go to the next one just to show what is existing, and I'll just call the other one recommended. It's color coded, so you got the yellow at a 35 mile per hour. The light blue is at 30 mile per hour, and the green is at 25 mile per hour. So there's a lot of changes from along some of these segments to reduce the speed limits. Based on the recommendations that were provided by the consult by QK4. This is the first recommendation. The second recommendation is a pedestrian. This was based on some feedback between a collaboration between us and the police department and community development and public works and city manager, Mr. Johnson. There is a recommendation to add a pedestrian connectivity right after the horizontal curve on North Peachtree Street. The only concern that we have is what are we going to connect it to? So you got sidewalk along North Peachtree on the west side. The biggest concern is that what are we going to connect to? Currently, there's no sidewalk on the east side. So our recommendation is to definitely look into it in the future as far as providing connectivity to Reps Miller and to Sunset. And this is right at the intersection with Oak Terrace. And just to kind of give you an idea, it's missing about, if we're going to actually connect that side, the pedestrian crossing, it's missing about 0.7 miles of sidewalk on the east side. Of course, you would have to consider grading, drainage, possible right-of-way acquisition, and other things that we just need to look into to connect to. The other recommendation was to add some traffic calming measures. Some of 10 radar speed signs were recommended by QK4. Some is just to complement whatever's out there right now. Just if it's on the east side, Holcomb Bridge, if it's on the south, we put on the north. And along North Peachtree, just to complement the existing radar signs that are out there already. The second study was performed by Keckwood, and it really looked into some of the traffic calming measures that could be implemented on some of these roadways. These are already have a 25 mile per hour posted speed limit. So Lanier Boulevard and Hammond Drive, Rails Way and Langford Drive, Hunter Street, and West Peachtree Street. The study didn't really bring up a whole lot of issues. The biggest concern was the speeding evaluation, which, and sorry for the
Sorry.
animation. So along West Peachtree Street, there was, and if you notice, it's right, West Peachtree, which is at 12, it shows the excessive speed. So if it's anything above 5 or 7, I'm sorry, so if it exceeds the 5 mile per hour, then it's considered excessive. I'm sorry, a problem. If it exceeds a 15 mile per hour, it's considered to be an excessive speed, and it's something that you know, we should look into a little bit further as far as traffic calming measures. This is the excessive speed, and it was only observed on 3 roadways. You notice on Hammond Drive, there was one vehicle that was over the 15 mile per hour. As far as also Langford Drive, there were 2 on the northbound that were considered to be excessive. And the West Peachtree Street, west of Red Wine Street, there were some excessive speeds that were collected out there. I spoke to the consultant. We're in continual discussion about how to how to address some of these issues, and he gave me the breakdown of the speeds that were witnessed over there. So this breaks down into other speed limits as well. So that's also provided in the data in the traffic study. General costs, it's about $95,000 to address some of these concerns and some of these, whether it's signage or the pedestrian connectivity or other measures, lighting. There's recommendation to provide some lighting along the Railsway, some speed cushions, and other measures that would look into reducing the speed limit and calming the traffic as we address them. This was brought by Mr. Johnson when we first started talking about this. Is Vision Zero, and he would definitely provide a little bit more clarification as far as what this vision is. But I know that the ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers, in 2020 launched its Vision Zero Standing Committee to aggressively advance the goals of the Vision Zero and towards zero death movements. This is being implemented by a lot of different cities and municipalities in Georgia. For example, City of Atlanta has its goal to reduce traffic-related fatalities by 2030. We know that there are other municipalities that are implementing this Vision Zero, and it could be implemented by, creating some policies and some procedures that would help to get the citizens involved in some of these decisions, as far as looking into what roadways have some issues as far as traffic and speeding, and to kind of streamline this process a little bit more. That's pretty much it. Ready for any questions if you want.
Thank you so much for that presentation. We'll open the floor for a council discussion. Councilmember Bear?
The number one question I would have is, yeah, I live on North Peachtree, but why is there, like Charlotte said at our last meeting, why are there 6 stop signs on my way to work, which is over there off of Langford? I have to go through 6 stop signs once I get to Thrasher Park, and there's none on my part of North Peachtree. Why can't we consider a stop sign somewhere in this very area right here?
Yeah. I put a stop sign right there and a signalized, well, you don't do stop signs for you don't do signalized crossing for stop signs, do you? Or would that be overkill?
You don't do signalized?
So if we have a stop sign, there's no reason for a push button signalized crossing. That seemed like it'd be an overkill.
I've never seen it, but I mean, I've read a lot of this, and sorry.
No, you good?
Matthew, great job on that. It's 300-something pages worth of stuff he just put in 5 minutes. That's pretty impressive. So. But I'll tell you, I've never read anything that says you can't do what you just said. I would highly recommend it at that location.
Yeah, at this location here?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. On my way walking my child to church on Sunday, a lady crossed right here with her child to get on go in. The problem is she actually had to go, because there's no curb cut there, she had to go all the way down to Chastain Manor,
Right.
in the road, actually that's a decel lane, make a U-turn and go back up to continue.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say let us find a definitive answer on that.
Yep.
My concern, and I'm not an engineer, don't even play one on TV, but I believe it's a minor arterial.
It is a minor arterial, yeah.
Is North
That- the
Peach Street.
classification, yeah.
That's your answer as to why there's not been any stop signs on it. In my understanding of everything I've read, doesn't mean we can't. You stated it several times already tonight, you make policy, and if policy wants a stop sign on there, we can do it. My concern is, it is a major street from a traffic perspective, and so some sort of signalization is going to be required, I believe. Either for a crosswalk, like you just said, or flashing red or something like that, which may annoy people at night, but I'm concerned about the running of that stop sign, call it 24/7. I mean, and I can't be there all the time. So I would be concerned about that. An option, as you've seen, what is it, OC Park? There's OC Park over in Johns Creek. The neighborhood that surrounds it gets a lot of stop signs that are run all the time. They have the LED flashing lights around the stop sign, so that's an option too. So my opinion, start a little low on the scale as far as what we can try with that, and then go up from there if more is needed.
So if I can add, so one reason why I appreciate Kathy putting the Vision Zero, and you haven't asked us to do that, that's something I just discovered. But the manual on uniform traffic control devices is the Bible by which traffic engineers live. And if you had someone from GDOT here, you'd be hard pressed to get them to ever do anything outside of that. I've dealt with the GDOT commissioner and an entire county, and they won't touch it. But the magic of Vision Zero is that communities that have adopted Vision Zero have said, we have the ability to set a policy to make it safer for pedestrians. And so they set higher standards. And the challenge with going beyond that MUTCD is if you get hauled into court because there's an accident, someone said, well, that signal shouldn't have been there. It wasn't justified. The challenge is, that is the Bible unless you have a justification for going behind. And I think saying that we believe that citizens or safety, pedestrian safety, is a reason to go beyond normal standards. And you probably can't do that on a state road, but when you're talking about a road that you can control, I think that would be your justification. Whether you formally adopt Vision Zero, but Vision Zero, the whole idea is zero pedestrian deaths. And if you're doing things, and Atlanta just adopted it, Macon is the only other city in the state that's been in that program. There's only about 52 in the entire United States. One is New York City, which kind of too big to think about. But adopting a standard that says we are intentionally going to an even safer standard than would otherwise be recommended gives you, I think, that excuse to make North Peach Street safer. And I'm amazed at how many people, any time of the day, are out, whether they're running, walking a dog. I've never seen that in my life, to see how many people in this community are out. And so that is a rationale to go further than what might otherwise be set by standards.
all right. I'm not entirely, I appreciate that information. Does this mean that this is our road? Who designated this as a minor arterial?
Typically GDOT. GDOT has a map online. It's an ArcGIS type map
Okay,
that
so
provides that
they
classification.
dictate that?
Yes.
But it's our asset, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can,
You
as
can
the
set
chief
your
said, we can set our own standards.
Yes.
I don't wanna get too bogged down, but on North Peach Street, but there is a unique, and I know Ms. Beard has talked to you a lot about it. Ms. Beard has talked to me a lot about it. And just for some background, can we get a map up there?
The curve.
So Ms. Beard lives right across the street from Chastain Manor on Oak Cove. Our advice from city staff was, in order to cross the road safely, she used to get to downtown Norcross, she used to go northbound where there is no sidewalk, cross at Reps Miller to go southbound into downtown, which means she has to walk in the street because there's no sidewalk. So a lot of the impetus of why we're looking at this is because she's just hammered this home. So you mentioned something about the 0.7 miles on,
It's both ways, so,
Okay.
I'm not sure, I think I have it here, it's about, 1,400 linear foot to Reps Miller up
Okay.
north, and then 2,300, further down south to Sunset Drive.
are we required, if we were to put a sidewalk simply from Oak Cove, because further down, you go further down, there's the next little neighborhood's that little, where the Hesters live, of course they've sold since, but there's a sidewalk there, then there's a gap, then there's Oak Cove, and then there's a gap. If you were to take a sidewalk from Oak Cove to, Oak Terrace, which there's a decel lane there already, or is that an accelerant? That might be an, so zoom in for us. By the way, Mr. Gaynor sent me his points, and I'm on point 1. We all know Mr. Gaynor can make some points, so we'll work our way through them. Okay, keep zooming in for us.
Shift to this one.
All right, now we're gonna move the mouse this way.
Keep going.
Okay, so there's a small turning lane there in Oak Terrace. So where would you recommend, so there's talk about Chastain Manor maybe putting a crosswalk, or is it best because of line of sight in Oak Terrace?
It's because of the line of sight, yeah, because there, you can actually see this horizontal curve, so, there was discussions about here, but further was moved a little bit further up.
Okay, that makes sense from a safety standpoint. And that's where we mentioned to the chief that we should put possibly a stop sign with some sort of crosswalk all in one.
What is put there, I would leave up to the
Okay.
experts, but a physical barrier of some sort, meaning a stop sign,
Okay.
something, yes, absolutely. Got it.
And again, the recommendation by the consultants was to actually add the pedestrian crossing along with the warning signal, so,
Instead of a stop sign.
yeah. I mean, there was no discussion about a stop sign, it was just a crosswalk with the warning signal, so.
And this gets to what Mr. Bear was talking about, which is there any reason not to have a stop sign there?
It just slows people down, you know, yeah.
All right, that's point 1 for Mr. Gaynor. You want me to continue?
Go ahead and continue, so.
This is all discoverable, so if anyone wants to, he'd like to see a raised crosswalk at Sunset and Thrasher. What kind of implementation would a raised, so you do have raised crosswalk, you say convert 3 existing crosswalks along South Peach Street and Norcross Tucker Road to raised crosswalks. Are those,
Those are existing crosswalks.
okay. What was the rationale for that location?
It's just to kind of provide some traffic calming measures, since it's something that's out there right now, to go ahead and convert it at this point.
Is there any reason we wouldn't look at that at other, especially around like Thrasher Park? You don't want them?
I hate raised crosswalks, they're awful.
They're awful.
Yeah, I hate 'em.
I'll second that. I think we can be more creative with traffic calming measures than raised crosswalks.
I would beg the council to hold back on those and see how this goes before we put those in.
Okay, but too, in fact, I think a better option is a raised intersection instead of a raised crosswalk. Obviously, that's a little more expensive, it's something to do with many Europeans. Well, I think that's good feedback.
I mean,
So is there any reason, like, when are we, Mr. Mayor, when are we to debate, like, what's the next step for this?
yeah, I was gonna ask that, like, are we to, I was gonna go there, exactly.
Well, because this is a work session, most of the discussion is held here. Moving forward, we need to be able to direct staff relative to the policy issues or the changes that we want to see from this meeting.
So,
Most of those costs are pretty modest, if you need right-of-way or if the sidewalk isn't priced at this point.
no, it's not, it's not.
But a lot of this is pretty.
Yeah, see,
And this may be,
the costs aren't, sorry,
I
Mayor.
was just going to say, this may be first blush, because there's a lot that we're trying to kind of figure out here, and
May I make a recommendation?
Yeah, go
So,
ahead.
so from a recommendation standpoint, I think this is first blush to your point, but we can start to state some of our policy directives that we
Sure.
would, and then we can dial in staff can dial in recommendations based on our feedback, like, we prefer not to see raised side, crosswalks. Well, that's some recommendations we can give staff, so when they come back to us with,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to giggle at you. I was reading Bruce's email, and every single bullet point after here was like, we need a raised crosswalk here, we need a raised
Yes.
crosswalk.
you know, if it's the majority of council says, hey, raised sidewalk is something maybe we'll come back to later, let's think about what all other processes we can implement. I think Councilman Bear made a great point. There are probably a need for a stop sign there, and if there's nothing prohibiting us legally from doing so, if the experts say we can, I think we have to pick the most optimal place to do so. Maybe one or two. I don't know the distance between them, but I think I'd support that, and I think that's something we can take a look at. All those places where we may mention raised sidewalks, is there an opportunity to put signaling? I like the flashing stop signs. I had this written down from last meeting. The flashing, they're motion sensors, so they don't flash just randomly. They flash as cars approach them or something like that. So I think they catch people's attention. Even if you're speeding, you're not aware. I've seen people hop raised crosswalks, but it's when you're something flashing at you, especially at night, it's going to catch your attention. So I think that's a great start, in my opinion, as a policy direction, is that some of these avenues and not avenues, but some of these particular spots where raised sidewalks were recommended, we might look at lighted signals. From my perspective, I did have something more on the speed, but I want to go through that list that Councilman Hickson is reading. I can go through mine too. I'll just.
Let's,
What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mayor.
yeah, let's.
So the next one is just speeding, the speed limits. I'm a fan of consistent speed limits, not going, and what the recommendation was, I saw a lot of choppiness of speed limits in a short distance. Back in the day, I would call those are the speed traps, right? We're going from 35 to 30 to 25 in like a matter of seconds. I'd either be supportive of taking them all to 25 or all 30 in the middle or wherever the right number is, but not chopping them up as that map showed. I just like consistent speed.
So are you talking about Holcomb Bridge in North Peachtree?
Well, there's a couple spots.
South Peachtree, they're saying 25, pretty much 25.
Yeah, but I recommend.
Everywhere, I'd say.
I'd be consistent everywhere. Wherever we need to be consistent, I wouldn't take part of Hunter Street and make it 25 and part of it 35. It's such a short street. North Peachtree, South Peachtree, Jones, all of those, I would be, as a policy, I would say, let's keep them consistent and maybe pick the lower of the two speeds provided.
So the reason, just specific to Holcomb Bridge, do you mind if I?
Yeah, go ahead, absolutely.
Is the consultant told us, because I had the same question, why on Holcomb Bridge, you're talking 35, they're coming into town, 35, 30, 25 is really what.
Right.
Why? And I said, I'll say what I said, this is the most asinine thing ever, because I can't enforce this, right? Because the distances are not, there's not a long enough distance in order to enforce it. So
Right.
it's not a speed trap, because I can't do anything. So it's the opposite.
Right.
So, but here's what they said, and then I kind of said, that makes sense. We can't control the other side of Peachtree Industrial, which is in the county on Holcomb Bridge, which is, I'm putting it on direction.
Yeah.
Which is 40 miles an hour. And so their suggestion is based on a gradual slowing down instead of going from 40 to 25. Does that make sense? So when you're 40 on the other side, and then you cross over, and if it was 25, that's your speed trap, quite frankly.
Right. I would be.
I'm not for it or against it.
Right. I would like to be consistent, and to me, my measuring stick is Atlantic. Right. As soon as you hit Atlantic, it's 25 all the way through, because that's where we ask trucks not to come through. That's kind of like a point. I'm not thinking that's Atlantic. You're coming. It's Atlantic. Yeah. When you get there, we've got signs that say no trucks.
Right.
They're turning.
But you're saying from Atlantic.
From Atlantic into the city is 25. So that's like a point of demarcation for most people when they see, because the lane's narrow, then we go from 2 lanes to 1 lane at that same spot. It just seems like a lot happens there. That's a great place to do it versus gradually taking it in my opinion. So just,
So you're saying leave the 35, which is the Atlantic to Peachtree Industrial, it's 35 now, and then when you cross over Atlantic, go to 25, and then let it go all the way through.
I would say that,
I'm
yeah.
not- Listen, I am a traffic officer at my heart, that's what I did. So the lower the better, the more
Yeah.
stop signs, the better, but that may not be the best thing from an engineering perspective.
Right, and we also gotta be cognizant of traffic patterns too. We don't wanna gridlock the city, for that standpoint too. So we gotta be intelligent about it, but to me, those type of common sense things is what I would like in a proposal back to us, is, hey, we've thought about this, and this section is why we decided to do this. Whatever is legally fair of us to do, because we could go by every street and find an anomaly, find an if-then statement from every single street.
Let me ask a question. Does Gwinnett County have any say in this?
Yeah,
Since Gwinnett County-
I've been trying to get in touch with Alex Hofflock, which is the traffic division director, and I'm still in the works of actually getting their feedback.
And that's the one segment that's not our road, so.
Holcomb Bridge, yeah.
Wait. Is it our road managed by the SDS agreement, or is it not our road at all? Is it still our asset? Can we
I
confirm
think
that?
it is.
My understanding, it's, anything that has to do with traffic, it's managed by Gwinnett County.
Mayor, you met
on-
with
on-
Gwinnett County.
on Holcomb Bridge.
trying
Asking about
to
Holcomb
do
Bridge.
something there at the intersection with Atlantic.
That's the only
Right,
road
that-
that we're
that
looking
is
at
Gwinnett
that would
County.
be county involved
Yes.
at all, so.
Okay, so my question was, though, is that managed through the SDS service? Did we allow them management, and who owns the asset? Who owns the road?
That one will.
So we can get that answer.
As I understand from when we raised it in front of David McElroy's house, they own the road all the way up to the railroad crossing. We own it from the railroad crossing on.
That's,
Yes.
Yeah.
that's not the case though, because a recent conversation with them indicated that Holcomb Bridge from Peachtree Industrial all the way to Beaufort is actually maintained by Gwinnett County.
Oh, okay, well, we're still talking about the same stretch, though.
Yeah,
But it's Gwinnett's.
yeah.
They told us at the railroad crossing it changed ownership, but
They might be managing it, but I believe it's a city street.
Well, that's the hard one I was thinking.
Yeah.
The whole way or from the?
From the railroad to the
I
Beaufort.
had to look at that when we started to get everybody together to do the overpass. And, that was part of our contribution because it was on the other side of the tracks. So, if it was all Gwinnett County, we really didn't have any obligation to anything. But it was determined for that purpose that it was a city street,
Right.
From the railroad crossing.
down to Beaufort.
Down to Beaufort Highway. That is true.
That sounds very.
That is true.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that from a safety perspective, I can overly articulate the need for it to be a lower speed, especially at the top of the hill near the curve. But new developments all in that area, I think there's even more coming. There's no reason why it can't be
I
justified.
put a stop sign, I mean, this is just me, I put a stop sign right there where Ruth is, and where the curve up is, that is a very dangerous place. And a stop sign, I mean, the county would never agree to it, but I think starting there, hey, we want to lower the speed limit and get a stop sign, and then we can get our speed limit. But I think right there at Ruth, because it's already one way down, right? So a stop sign, you wouldn't have to do a three-way stop, or, because it's one way only.
Yeah, you can only turn right. or left.
Yeah.
So Matthew, you've not had conversation with the county though, relative
No, I've
to
been
this?
trying to, I've sent the study and we've been going back and forth, but we're still waiting on their feedback and input on the Holcomb Bridge segment.
So it may be premature for us to make recommendations without the county.
Without their input, yeah.
For the county road, but for the.
For the Holcomb Bridge, yeah.
So
Right.
for the other one, I had a question where it's South Peachtree. Right now, the whole area of South Peachtree is 35, and the recommendation is to take part of that, the turn, as you come into the city, to split it between 30 and 25. I'd just say keep it 25.
25, okay.
This one right down here.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so just,
What's coming from Beaufort Highway?
yeah,
Can you pull that map up so that,
yeah, it was in your proposal. For you, it's the speed
Yeah, it
limit
was there.
comparison.
I think it's 209.
I just wanted us to be consistent, because I don't, as people,
Yeah, I think,
and we're talking 5 miles difference, right?
and it still allows them, in 25, it still allows them to go,
We won't say it.
36, right?
Mayor?
Yes,
So with regard to these expert opinions that have been put together for this presentation, you should be mindful of not going faster. You can go what they recommend and you can go slower, but we can't go faster.
right.
Because we will see this again.
Yes. Yeah, I think
Unless
our,
there's a municipal court.
yeah, I think our consensus is to go slower.
If there's an accident or.
So I was saying the one to the right corner, where the proposal is to split that to 2 different speeds to keep that to the lower of whatever is recommended.
So you're saying this part of South Peachtree, you keep this at 30?
No, that's recommended at 30,
Or
Change it to
change it
25.
right?
Okay.
Because it's 35 now on the left. If you look at the left map, it's 35, and now we're recommending it 30 and 25 split. I think it should just be 25.
I think the philosophy that you're getting at is that we know a lot of people cut through our town. That's fine. Just go slow, because there's a lot of pedestrians, and
Yes.
so I think, I'm all on board with, when you come into our historic downtown, you're going 25. It's just a citywide speed limit of 25, in the core.
25 mile an hour speed limit. If you look up here, it's outlined in blue. And I'd have 25 the entire city, that we control.
Yeah.
So Everglades Parkway.
And so, yeah, I agree. And so to pivot a little bit, one of the things I did have some concerns on the study per se, is like Hunter Street, where there were no, the study didn't see there was anybody. Now, I've often seen our patrol officers stop people on Hunter Street consistently for either running the stop sign at West Peachtree and Hunter, or taking at Hunter at West Peachtree, they just gun it to the railroad track. I mean, it's a short track, but I mean, you literally hear them just gunning it to another stop sign. So I wondered, it's where number 5 is, to the next intersection. So the bottom 5 to the next intersection, and then all the way that whole street. I've heard engines gunning it. I happen to live over there, so I do know that people are speeding. And then there's a steep hill there. And then what the biggest concern I have is, as we have a school over there and people are walking their kids from school, and when you're coming out of Hopewell, there's a significant climb up that hill to try to make that turn. I don't know if the study didn't address that, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on, because it seems like a concern to me in terms of a visual.
You're right, and they didn't address anything because they looked at it.
They didn't identify any issues. So I mean, the only issue that was, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Go ahead.
The only issue that they identified was actually this intersection, which was the sight distance because of an embankment. And if I do recall, I think they did recommend a stop sign here. I'll just have to go back and check and see if that's one of the recommendations.
Okay.
I think they did.
Wait, isn't there
There's already a stop sign.
Well, not at that particular intersection. It's 20 feet it's 50 feet further down by Callie's old house.
Yeah.
But there's right there at the Hunter Walker Trail, right? There's a crosswalk?
There's a crosswalk, but there's not a stop sign.
There's a stop sign above it. Yeah, there's a stop sign at Hunter Hall.
Yeah, a little further.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little further up.
above, yes.
Okay.
But what I was saying is, just in general, I was surprised that the report didn't show that, because I personally see so many issues there, and I do see our patrol officers out there stopping people, so they're seeing issues, I see issues. It was just an observation.
Well, they're stopping stop sign violations.
Right.
I pulled all that up, that's what there is.
It is stop sign.
One after another, stop signs. So I believe when Councilmember Gaynor sent out an email about Center Islands, like in
Yes.
Berkeley Lake, everything I've read says those are your gonna be most successful in places like that. Because you're not slowing them down to where they're going lower than the 25, but you're making them go the 25. They're not very successful for 30, 40, 50, but for 25, you want them to go 25, which is what
They'll stay that.
do, then they will slow down to 25. You put them close enough together, like they have them on Berkeley Lake, whatever that is, South Berkeley Lake, they don't have the opportunity to speed up to the next one to get too fast.
So I would appreciate those being some recommendations that we can talk to as a council, some of those type of things. From a policy, I'm trying to keep this high level and not go street by street, but those type of things, if we could see the most optimal places for them. So now that we have a study, then we can use our expertise on top of the study to present something to council to approve.
I think the study, from my perspective, it gives us exactly what Mr. Ryan was saying, gives us, here it is, here's the bar at the bottom, and you can do whatever more strict that you want, so long as you just, if they were to say, put a stop sign here, and you don't, that's bad.
Right.
But otherwise, I think it gives us the latitude to add what we feel is necessary.
Thank you.
Which I'll put one every 50 feet. I would love to.
I just, and all the council members here and the mayor know this, it's, you know, we're all raising our families here, have raised 4 kids here. There are a lot more strollers rolling around.
Yeah, there
And
are.
I hear it, and Matt hears it. They want the safe ways to cross our streets, and they want to not feel the cars zooming past them. And they seem to know pretty well that it's not their neighbors. So let's make it easy to get down here and safe for people to stay.
Yeah.
Any other glaring, either don't do this or missing places, missing?
I would,
Come up just briefly, recently that I think we're gonna add to this, for whenever we present this next time, is Thrasher Street between Autry, Kelly.
Yeah.
Going that direction.
Mhm.
That development wasn't there when we first started this, the one house that was there, and now it's.
The junction now, and then you have the, yep, there's a couple.
So I've talked to some residents there about it, and that, you know, again, down the hill, hit the gas and go, so we need to do something about that.
So the only thing I would like as an update is, as we, do we have a plan to get to every type of street? Like, what's our trajectory to get to some of the streets that we missed or we didn't cover?
So I'll just tell you from a high level, the entire city has been looked at.
Okay.
From a signage standpoint, from a road condition standpoint, and it's in the millions of dollars to replace signs, to move signs, to remove signs, that type of thing. It's out there, but we have it.
Mhm.
I've got a spreadsheet
For signage, it's millions of
for
dollars.
signage, for streets, crosswalks that are missing that need to be restriped and so on.
It's $95,000 here.
Oh, that's for that list.
And that's just for that small of an area, so that's,
Yeah.
what, 9 different sections of roadway.
Well, how do we, part of our job would be to prioritize that as
Correct.
well. So
And
how,
that's exactly what we're doing right now.
okay, so
That's
you'll
where
bring us
we're at.
back some recommendations and prioritization for other areas of the city that are equally important?
Yes,
or-
I would beg for some time, because it's extensive. When I
Yeah, it
say
is.
pages and pages and pages of signs and, crosswalks, and a
Can
lot of
there be
it.
any sort of, in the budget, just traffic study implementation line item? And we allow you to do what?
To pick out.
Yeah, we allow you as staff to.
That would be very
Well,
beneficial.
And the last thing we're gonna talk about tonight is the SPLOST and the allocations. And you may wanna revisit your transportation allocation when we get there, because all this takes money. And we're talking about a funding source for the 6 years that starts about a year from now, assuming a successful referendum. So, it's a long list, but even the signs, what are they, $125?
Well, it depends.
So,
And the
yeah.
reason why is because when you do replace it, you have to replace it with some fancy,
It's a
thank you,
federal
thermoplastic something.
retroreflectivity.
You don't have to
standard.
replace it, but when you do, it's gotta be these certain specs, same as a sidewalk.
Well, I think
You
our
have to put the
citizens-
sidewalk in, but when you do.
I think our citizens would appreciate us getting up to speed on this stuff, and for their council members to look at how to fund it. But if we can get a priority list, we know we can't fund everything at once, but if we get a priority list, I think we can make the decision to push us forward to get what our citizens deserve, right? They live in this community too. So I think it's important for us to get that priority list, but in fairness, give you the due time to get through it. We want the best product out, so I don't want to rush anybody to get something.
I would feel comfortable saying for the budget presentation, we could have that. We could have that. Just caution that everyone wants their road fixed. Me as well. I've got
Oh, yeah.
a plane into where I live, so.
I would personally want us, I mean, this is what's presented in front of us. I'd want to start with we would prioritize, I mean, I think we've all kind of have consensus, hey, a stop sign and crosswalk at that particular location makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Then I think that funding at a large level and allowing staff to do what they do, instead of us getting nitpicky down into this, is probably the best way to go.
Yeah. I agree. I think we just need to set our policies, set our vision of like, hey, we don't want, I don't know, a bouncy house in the middle of the street to slow down stuff. Whatever it is, I'm making something up because I don't want to be prescriptive. We set that and then let staff implement it, to your point, Councilman Hickson. And for this particular, what's in front of us today, it wasn't recommended to come out of the budget, so we should go forward with our decisions on what we accept and don't accept in terms of that. Is that fair for our council? Since this is not asked of the budget, it was asked of SPLOST, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, SPLOST 2017.
What's your funding mechanism for this 95?
Was it-
Well, I don't think we have to wait a year for the 95, we'll know something for that. I'm trying to look at how we can better use some of your leftover, so it's a little bit of a chain of events, but right now we took some COVID-19 CARES Act money and set it aside for some projects this year. I think most of those projects that we have planned to use that money for this year are actually eligible for the 2014 SPLOST, which had some admin facilities money left over. You spend the 2014 money, you spend your most restrictive and your oldest money first, and you save your least restrictive. We could be freeing up some money that's in this year's budget, that's available, but when we roofed this building and the price tag was $160,000, take it out of the 2014 SPLOST, free up that $160,000 that's in this year's budget. Now you start to add a funding source for one-time things. And, this is cheap. Road resurfacing is a $17 million list, and we know from 1 till 84 exactly the sequence, because it's based on data that was collected on every 10-foot segment of every single road, every part of the city. So we know where to spend road resurfacing money, and that's gonna be your SPLOST discussion. For some of this, you wanna get started, let's try to free up some of the money that we have today.
So the recommendation
But
here,
it's moving and oh, by the way, Paul Annabeth over here is your new finance director, so he's gonna be helping us
Paul.
do that if we haven't scared him off yet.
Well, I think the shell game you just described probably, I didn't see it get up. So if this is on our agenda for the next Monday, council meeting.
Right.
And we approve funding source and we say, hey, go find it.
Yeah.
Or how would it come out of contingency, or how would you?
Well, I'm gonna try to use some of those capital dollars, but the one thing to keep in mind is 95,000, and that does include any sidewalk on the east side of North Peachtree. But you put in an intersection, so at some point, get the intersection, get people to slow down, make it safer for pedestrians. We might then, segment by segment, look at how we introduce the sidewalk on that side. When you get closer to town, there's an area where you're gonna cut someone's front yard pretty short because you're gonna move a rock wall
Well,
further
I'm a
away.
big proponent on sidewalks on both sides of the street. I really think it's important.
Yeah.
I'd rather have sidewalks on streets that don't have sidewalks first.
Before you have to cross it.
Yeah.
No, before we have sidewalks on both sides.
Yeah, so I'd identify maybe, Rails Road or some road that maybe doesn't
Does
have
that make
any
sense?
sidewalks.
Got it.
And I think that's a better use of funds.
Yes.
So I'm confused. Matt, are you okay with, if this is on our agenda, would you wanna punt this and handle?
No. Obviously, the first section of this, the raised crosswalks, I would.
You're, okay.
But,
That's a big portion of it too.
yeah, there's a big portion of it, so we could save some there. But also, what I was reading was it says funded by 2017 SPLOST in the agenda package. So I was clarifying.
Yeah, the challenge, now we scare people when we talk about moving funding sources, but the 2017 SPLOST is right now allocated to the Beaver Ruin Greenway, and it will take more of our transportation money than we'll have between now and the end of the 2017 SPLOST, based on what I've seen so far.
Okay.
And we're supposed to go to construction in 2024. If we have another SPLOST, maybe we'll push some of that Beaver Ruin Greenway construction money, 20% match that we have to provide to get 80% from GDOT by way of ARC. We maybe will move some of the funding of the Beaver Ruin Greenway out to that next SPLOST to free up some of the current SPLOST to do some projects in the short term.
Okay, that all makes sense, unless.
But it all gets back to, you want to have enough transportation money in the 2023 SPLOST to do the commitments you've made, like the Beaver Ruin Greenway and resurfacing and everything else. But it's a matter of, as I said before, it's using your most restricted money first, which which is use your current SPOS before you use the SPOS that hasn't been even approved. Use your oldest money first, use the 2014 SPOS where we can, before we use 2017 SPOS. So we need a little
Yeah,
more time.
so to answer you on that, Councilmember Hickson.
I'm Andrew.
It's just hard to say Councilman
You
Hickson.
don't have to say councilman. I went 12 years without it. You call me
Andrew, what he mentioned there, I just want to say, yeah, I'm okay with us pushing forward. Obviously, with that small correction, that small omission, in my opinion, for the raised crosswalks. But I think we should add the recommended sign that we discussed in this policy discussion. Right? We talked about a stop sign with flashing. I think we should add that to that meeting.
Can we vote on this, though, if we don't have the sign-off from Gwinnett County? I mean, I guess we could say what our opinion is, and then we either get it or not, and,
Approve it subject to.
yeah, subject to Gwinnett County's.
I have, if you'll allow me, Mayor, I have one more question about
Sure.
funding. How much of our fund balance has been allocated for the salary study implementation? And that's the least restrictive, newest money I would consider fund balance, the newest money, and least restrictive. Would we ever want to utilize fund balance for any of these type of items? So where would you recommend we use some of this fund balance to start returning it to the taxpayer?
We're gonna talk about fund balance later tonight because we have a $17.5 million unfunded liability that we're working our way to try to reduce. The other thing I would say is that I'm due back by May and another, not trying to scare you, Paul. Just joking. One of the things that we need to look at is, I'm due back with information on 2 different versions of an annexation. And the part that is mostly done is what departments need in terms of staffing and other costs. The part that needs another look is the revenue side of it, which Paul and I can work on. But in either scenario, the first year, you'll have very few revenues, and you'll have almost a full year's worth of cost, even though it's an 8-month year, because the bill has to hire law enforcement officers. They need a vehicle, and you have to buy that up front. So the challenge right now is both scenarios likely will have a shortfall of adequate revenue in that first 8-month year, because an annexation takes effect on January 1. And the fiscal year in which we'll collect the first property tax revenue starts 8 months later. So there's gonna be probably $1 to $2 million at least, fund balance to make.
How do new cities fund themselves?
You take that a loan. And then the challenge is you have to figure out when you can pay that loan back. If you went and looked at the last annexation study, it talked about, we tried to address the cash flow issue by saying you can borrow money.
I think
without any expectation
we're
of
off
paying
this
it back.
agenda item, sorry.
But we can look, I mean, we'll look at every possible scenario to make money available to do what you want to do.
Most
That's our job.
new cities pay through bonds.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're back here on this issue. Where we're gonna go with it at our next regular session. From my opinion, there's some low-hanging fruit that that we can address at that meeting. It's a huge study. Equity is important. You need to look at the entire city. There may be some issues in other parts of the city that are just as, you're trying to correct dangerous issues that are just as dangerous as the ones that we've seen and we talked about today. So equity is something that's important too.
And
So-
we keep track of all complaint areas, and that's where this came from.
Mhm.
So I would ask that if you hear of any others, send them directly to me so I can address them and then add them to the list, because if it's a reoccurring thing that we can take care of, as you just
Right,
said,
right.
prioritizing, then we'll do it.
Yeah, so I know that former council member Barry Payne would be here if he knew this discussion was going on tonight.
Thank you so much.
We certainly appreciate y'all doing the legwork and bringing this to us. And at our next meeting, like I said, if there's some low-hanging fruit that we can address, let's certainly do that, if we have the dollars for it.
I'll go there.
Thank you so much, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, let's move to item 3, sanitation services RFP.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item was presented last week, and in the interim, City Manager, Mr. Johnson, has added some additional language to it. So this additional language can address certain things, 2 options: extending the existing contract for 1 year or going out for a bid process. By a 1-year extension on the existing contract, we can address uncertainties with fuel that may stabilize within 1 year. And there's still potential service interruptions that are COVID impacted, relating to the labor markets. We also talked last week about reducing costs by eliminating yard waste, vacuum surfaces, every other week recycling, or charge for bulk waste. I know that a lot of people were not in favor of those discussions, but I want to put it out there. So do you have questions for myself or Mr. Johnson?
Council, any questions at this time?
No questions here, just a comment. I think as far as addressing the RFP question, that's what's before us today, right?
That's really the only question is, do you want us to negotiate a contract extension, or if you want to do the RFP, then we would literally put it on the street next Tuesday.
Yeah, so to me, I think I made my personal decision on that question. As far as the larger question, in terms of bringing costs down that you mentioned, I think we probably need to look at a comprehensive part of our budgetary cycle to see what we can do to do that. I mean, I think there's a couple levers we can pull to reduce impact to our citizens and reduce overall cost to the average citizen in our community. So I think we can take that holistic approach during the budgetary cycle, but for your particular agenda item, I'm ready to move forward with that.
So are you considering reducing services?
No, reducing the cost of services.
Oh, okay.
As an average, right? I mean, we've got levers to pull. There's things, Assistant City Manager Mary Beth mentioned different things just now. I think we can take a holistic approach and say, all right, let's put it all on the table and what we can do, because this won't necessarily, a bill doesn't go out until we set a budget. So we can do this during the budgetary cycle. And then we can and by that time we'll know exactly what this quote will be, whether or not we're going to quote someone else or quote the requote, advanced disposal, AKA waste management. We'll know what the dollar amount is and what we need to reduce. Until then, right now, we can speculate what the cost is going to be, and we can start trying to pull, well, let's take away this, take away that, and we don't even really know what the true cost is going to be until we get the quote back.
Right.
That's why I was wanting to kind of parse the 2 situations. Even though we got into a discussion last week, as Mary Beth mentioned, we talked about reducing, but I think the reducing piece needs to be budgetary, and this piece we need to make a decision whether or not we're going to change or go out for, stay what we have for 1 year or go out for quote for a bid or whatever it's called. So, but I made my decision on that part, so I just wanted to make that clear. So.
Okay.
So is this going to be presented to us at the April meeting as an either or?
Yes.
Next week, next Monday.
Right.
You have to decide, do we issue an RFP, or do we negotiate with Waste Management for an extension?
I'm sorry, is our contract up right now, or are we until the end of the year?
August,
August.
end of August.
So we're good to go until August.
Yeah, but
But if you want to get proposals.
Yeah, we have to
do
fill
that.
that time.
We have to do that immediately because they need time to respond. We need you to make a decision, and that decision has to be made with the schedule we have. I guess if we issue an RFP, and the companies that propose will know at your policy work session what we're recommending based on the scoring and which includes price. They won't know until weeks later whether you approve that or not, but they'll have a little over 3 months notice of the intent, whether it's Waste Management, whether it's Republic, whether it's any of the other firms. There's 5 firms that the county has on their list. There are others that are in the immediate area. We don't know how many want our business, but.
So is it fair to say that it's time sensitive to the fact that if we do choose someone else, they would have to ramp up resources?
They have to figure out the routes. They have to make sure they have the people, the equipment.
carts.
Trucks,
And,
carts.
We're in an unusual period. And the other issue, normally I would be always, and I think the other part. We have every reason to believe our costs will be significantly higher than it is now. I mean, looking around, those that have gone out, that's the opportunity for cost to take
Well,
into
it's an unknown
consideration.
no matter what, right?
But the second issue of changing providers is the service interruption. There's always
Right.
gonna be some, you don't know how bad it is, but cover your ears, Steve. We've had service interruption under our existing contract because they had to find, enough people to staff. We have a labor-intensive approach now, and that was part of what might go out next year, is you might be able to lure people to, do a more automated process with one person per truck versus two. But right now, our service is 2 people per truck, and I think some of you live in an area with an alley that other truck may not make it down, so we'll still have to have some 2-person pickup. But we're speculating, and that's where, for the 6 of you that live here and see your neighbors every day, which is the better path from your perspective? I've changed my mind in the last 2 months.
Well, can you do me a favor then, or do us a favor?
Yeah.
Of the cities in the metro area that have went out for RFP in the last 4 or 5 years, what was the average number of bid responses? Can you find that out for us?
We can try.
I mean, if we're
Let's
talking.
see what we get.
I mean, the idea of having 5 companies compete for our business does seem like, well, that's the market. The market's gonna drive down the prices, right? But if we're finding out the average is only 2 in individual marketplaces, then the opportunity to drive down that price isn't nearly as much.
Well, Alpharetta had 5, and we know that they went out, they awarded it last August.
But if you could maybe just find out, would that be too onerous, or?
It's if they have it online or they answer a phone, but
Okay.
it's no different than when you try to survey salaries and you get what you can get.
Okay.
So we're gonna move this forward, to the next regular session?
Yes, sir.
So we have 3 options, right?
2 options.
I guess the third option we could add, I guess, well, number 1, we go out for bids. Number 2, we get an extension.
Yes.
The third, I would like to see a recommendation from staff.
I think Mr. Johnson has made a recommendation.
It's the new language there. If you
Yeah.
can push that up.
Should be the last sentence of the next, it's the second paragraph.
Keep
Maybe.
going on the background.
Because you have information that we're not all privy to. And you've done some homework relative to this issue, and so had some discussions with some other,
So my point is, either option can be implemented, but we need to know that answer quickly. And I'm
could you
recommending-
repeat that? I'm sorry.
I said, either option that can be implemented. We've got 2 options before you.
Right.
I'm recommending that you both do an contract extension for 1 year. I would say that we would start the next RFP process 9 months from now, not 12 months from now, so that we would have even more time, particularly if we go out and we ask the bidders to consider going to the vehicles that are self-loaders and only use the driver. I think we need to give more time for a company to be prepared. Even for Waste Management, they would need different equipment than what they're using today. But, as I said, I've changed my mind in the last 2 months based on fuel prices. We know that there were other issues, but,
Well, in this COVID environment too, you have supply chain issues that I don't think I don't know, maybe Councilmember Myers, I think you were sort of in tune with supply chains.
It's not any better.
Yeah. So those are things we have to consider for our citizens.
I mean, big companies have equipment on order because they're replacing equipment. Small companies, I don't know that you would get 5, because I don't know whether a small company would have the confidence of being able to hire people in addition to trying to get vehicles within a 3-month turnaround.
Yeah.
I mean, my first year in local government worked for a jurisdiction that gave companies 1 month's notice of an award of a contract. And large companies, we had BFI, which some along the way went away, but the large companies knew that they had equipment that was coming in to replace old equipment, and they would simply divert that to the town where I worked,
Okay, so we'll bring it back, the regular session. Thank you so much
And we'll
for,
see if we get some information, some other
Yes.
information.
thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, let's move to Norcross letter art installation.
That'll be dead
There
by
we go.
1,000 cuts. That's mine too.
I was about to go down.
You had a lot of
So-
agenda items.
So some of, you left all of mine for tonight. So I think a key here is, some of us had the opportunity to go out and visit the old county library building that, I think we've gotten to the title yet.
Yeah.
Oh, do we have it now? Okay. So it's now ours. And we looked at a potential location, whether temporary or permanent, at the intersection of, I think, Stevens and Beaufort Highway. The question for us is, do you want to do a temporary installation at a location like that? Do you want to consider holding off until you have a permanent location? We just need some direction, but we still have our engineer here, and he looked at that site. And for those of us that are out there, or if you've driven by, there's 3 big black plastic pipes that cascade down the hill from the low end of the parking lot to take some of the rainwater from the parking lot and direct it to the very spot that we're looking at as a potential location. That doesn't work, so we've looked at where we could put a sewer pipe to channel that water away from where we might put the sign. Again, it's at the bottom of the hill in front of the old library. We have to move a street light that's there. There is a county sewer line that is nearby. You know, the likelihood that they need to do a repair on that sewer line in the near term is probably pretty small. But just need some direction as to whether you'd like us to go forward with the temporary, and we'll gather the cost of doing that. But we have to divert the stormwater from the library parking lot if we're gonna put something in place of that. We just have to have an alternate solution to black plastic pipe. So just looking for a little bit of direction, what you want to do there, or there's been some discussion of going someplace else in the permanent
Councilmember
solution.
Myers, I think you.
I am okay with delay if we have to. I think there's been a lot of energy around this, and there's been a lot of effort put into getting the sign built. And so I do want to show that off to the community. But if it's not advisable to do that without significant cost, I'd be okay with waiting until we can find a permanent home for it. But I'm okay putting it there temporarily as well. So I just want to make sure my fellow council members know that I'm amenable to either the path forward there. What I would ask is what, I would like it there before our next anniversary. So at some point we can hit it with the champagne bottle, or so to speak, and bless it. What would it, what's the installation time, right? That's October. What's the time? If we could make a decision in September and have it installed in October, or do we need to make a decision from the time we make a decision, how long would it take to be installed? Just so I would understand what our citizens would have to wait.
Putting in a cement foundation that it can be mounted to, and maybe some grading.
Probably make that happen quick.
Tell Donnie where to grade, he'll be out there the next day.
So we're talking less than a month? Okay, so from my perspective, if it takes less than a month to install it, I think we could technically wait unless the rest of the council feels that, that we want to go ahead and get this out to our community. I do think it's going to look really nice no matter where we put it. I think the temporary location or temporary or permanent location that we talked about would be a good location, but it doesn't have to be the location. I can think of a few other locations that would be good as well. But if it doesn't take less than a month, I'd be okay with waiting as well. I just don't want to wait past October. Just talk about a personal line in the sand.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
I would say that the sewer, we should do no matter what, because that's our building now, and to have black pipes coming down that hill is ugly, and not very good neighborly in terms of stormwater management. So that should be done no matter what, as soon as possible. My personal opinion is that I'd like to get these letters up here and get them out and get them enjoyed, and then we could, because I think that if we delay, it'll end up being longer. It's easy to delay, and I'd just like to get these turned back around to where people are enjoying them. That's just my own 2 cents. Go ahead and do the sewer no matter what we do, even if we decide not to put the letters there, but my own personal preference is just get them up. Because even if something would work out, I think you and I are thinking the same thing, you're still looking, you could be looking at 2 years before they actually got up there. And so might as well get them up. We can always move them later. It's not rocket science to move these things. It doesn't take that much concrete to put them down on. It's not that much expense. So that would be my 2 cents.
Okay. So we'll move this to the regular session. Okay. All right, let's move to item 5, participation agreement with the Georgia Municipal Employees Benefit System. Eric, that's
So
yours.
we've taken a couple steps already. As of January, we changed the policy that new retirees will contribute to their post-employment health care, and phasing it over time. It's a fairly modest increase per year, $25 a month per year, until we get to where an employee would contribute 25% of the cost of that benefit, and and continue to increase the cost for a dependent until the dependents contribute 50%. So that's one item. Another item that you implemented was that effective any employee given a job offer on or after, I think, the 9th of March would not be eligible for this benefit. So short term, you're not going to see a lot of impact of those, but they will grow over time because we'll have higher contributions that we'll get credit for from new retirees, and over time you'll have, when the actuary looks, they had 151 people that they said would be eligible, and they're assuming for that benefit. And they're assuming that some percentage of someone hired a year ago will make it to retirement, a higher percentage of people hired 5 years ago will make it to retirement, an even higher percentage of people hired 10 years ago. So as time passes, there will be more and more positions where we turn over where the new employee won't be eligible for that benefit. I'll pick up Paul again. Paul is probably the last one in the door that will be eligible for that benefit because you made the decision. You'd already been offered the job, you made the decision tonight. I think it's 3 weeks ago. So the next step is to create a irrevocable trust. There's a document that is in your packet from GMA, specifically GMEBS, participation agreement. You'd have to agree to it, they'd have to agree to it. If you agree to that agreement, it just sets up a trust fund. The next step is you have to put money into that. And as you deem a willingness to put money into that, both up front and on an ongoing basis, we'll get increasing credit for the fact that that $17.5 million liability, which is today entirely unfunded, has some money available. And the more money that goes into that trust, the greater the interest rate assumption that the actuary can make about how that will build over time and address the future liability. Because the current liability is 17.5. The future is significantly higher than that. But it's up to you. I made a recommendation of $1 million from fund balance that goes into that. I think we have in the general fund close to $11 million based on what the audit partner told me a few weeks ago. The best practice for fund balance for a AAA rated community is to have a minimum of 30%. So 30% is probably closer to $5 million, and we have close to 11. So I still have some latitude. I mentioned that we're going to talk about how we implement an annexation. We go forward with either the annexations or any other annexation. How much you put in future years will be part of your budget discussion each year. And now I put in here what I heard the actuary say. I listened to very closely to what he suggested, because we were talking 150,000, and the number he threw out was $500,000 a year. But each year you'd be making that decision based on knowledge about where you ended the prior year and a decision as you're in the budget process deciding everything else. So you're not bound by anything, but the more you put in, the more that will get credit for cash in the trust fund, and the more money that's in the trust fund, the greater the interest rate that they will assume, discounting future costs to today's dollars. So the only thing I'm suggesting today is authorize creation of the trust fund. That'll go to GMA, and they have to agree, but there's no reason for them not to agree.
Do we not need to agree on the?
And I would suggest you also agree to a dollar amount, and I think it needs, given the $17.5 million liability, I would suggest that $1 million sounds like an impressive amount of money, at least in an Austin Powers movie, right?
Okay, any other questions, council? We're moving forward.
No, I just appreciate your leadership on this.
Yeah, it's a burden off a lot of our backs.
Okay, let's move to item 6, adoption of proposed 2023 SPLOST allocations.
SPLOST, and what we brought back is, I will say, we haven't, I mean, the mayor's been in a different meeting. For me, I don't think we've gotten from the county anything terribly definitive about at least the dollar amount.
Not yet.
There's a resolution that Pat has already put together that you approved, or the council approved back in 2016, which basically authorizes the mayor on behalf of the city, along with the attorney, to sign an intergovernmental agreement, which is the last step in the process that the county will have. And that same document is signed by every city in Gwinnett County. What I'd like to push you towards is to get towards feeling comfortable with a percentage allocation, with the understanding that up until the time that the county actually asks us for a document, you can still change your mind. But I will tell you, the number that you have, if you can go down, that's there, okay. So
40, 40, 20.
About 40% for transportation, which includes resurfacing, where we know we have a specific list of needs. 40% for administrative facilities, and a portion of that would be part of that public safety building discussion we've had. But if you move police and dispatch and code enforcement and the municipal court out of this building, you're gonna need some money to renovate this building if you're gonna wanna be able to make it as usable as possible. You've talked about the possibility of a cultural arts center, and I've talked to the city manager's office in Sandy Springs about going over and looking at their facility, and they just need us to give them kind of a date range, and they'll tell us we'll all be welcome to take a look at their facility. And then there's Parks and Recreation, and we talked earlier today, what do you want to do at Rossi Brundage, but also other opportunities around the city. I will tell you the difference between your number and the theoretical number that I came up with before that meeting on the retreat was 50% for transportation and 30% for admin. And as much as we need money for admin, the mayor talked about financing. I think we know that part of the public safety building is going to need to be financed. It's probably legitimate, because the public safety building is going to have a long useful life. We get renovated from time to time, but it's going to last 50 years, and financing it over 20 years is not at all unusual. But I think you're going to find more and more needs for transportation, whether it's what we talked about earlier, whether it's the evaluation of condition of our infrastructure. And as I mentioned, the Beaver Road Greenway, whether you put as much as you can out of the 2017 SPLOST, or you push more of it to the 2023 SPLOST, that's a transportation project in terms of how we've historically defined it. My thought is you could probably use that extra $2 million for transportation projects and find ways to spend it. But this is one of the biggest policy decisions you make, because it's going to have a 6-year impact starting about a year from now.
So tonight we're focused on percentage.
Percentage,
And-
we can't convert that into a dollar amount.
Right,
other than
right.
The best number we have is that will mean $23.86 million for us, but that's not not an official county number, it's a number that came out of Swanee because the finance director in Swanee is doing some of the work for the county so far and trying to come up with the best estimate.
Yeah.
But-
So are we okay with the percentages that are presented, or do we want to modify?
I'm okay with them, and I would just be hesitant to modify them tonight without the other two council members, because those percentages we came up to as a group of 5, if we were gonna consider modifying them, I'd rather do it at the table at the April meeting based on Eric's recommendation when all 5 of us are here. That's my own 2 cents.
Sure.
No, it's still a work session, so it's still appropriate we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not our fault that
Yeah.
our council members aren't here. It's odd that we should be able to talk about it. I personally would change, I would go up on transportation, maybe to 55%. We've spent a lot of money in Parks and Recs over the last 12 years that I've been on council, over 2 SPLOST. And you cannot spend that's not operational money, that's simply capital money. A lot of the residents I've talked to feel that it's time for more transportation projects, and the Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway is a transportation project. Can we not fund it from transportation?
Oh, we are now.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yeah, the key is, when the price went to 11 million and our obligation was 2.2 of that, we spent a lot of money, and you talked about safety tonight, and you talked about equity, and I point out that, we did the safe route to schools, which ended up costing more than was anticipated, and that's typical for that type of project. That's in East Norcross. And the Beaver Ruin Greenway, which is a transportation project, is gonna cost a lot more than anyone anticipated, but that's unfortunately what happens with transportation projects. They have a long timeline. Again, that's on East Norcross, so.
Yeah, I think the reason I bring it up is,
But those are contributed to transportation
yeah,
that we
but
have now.
there's one thing that's not left in here is we can still budget items. We can still budget
Yes.
capital items if we so choose. We can, if we have a better year than expected, we have fund balance. This isn't locked in stone, but I think that we should do more in transportation, maybe a little less in admin facilities, and I would cut Parks and Recs down to 10 personally. I mean, $2.5 million over 6 years of capital expenses seems pretty decent for the number of parks we have. I recall, our favorite park now is probably Thrasher Park, one of our most used parks, and it was $800,000 to remodel. That's a great value.
Yeah, it was.
Isn't the Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway special in that it could be looked at both as park money and transportation?
It could. I would suggest that once you pegged it as a transportation project, you lose all credibility for SPLOST for a long time to come if you start categorizing 2 different ways. Theoretically, for 2017 SPLOST, I think it has to be exclusively transportation. You might be able to say that starting in the 2023 SPLOST, if you want it to come out of recreation. The challenge is, we talked about moving funding sources, and I hope no one got upset by that, but that's what finance people do, is try to figure out, and we do that in our personal lives, what source do we use to pay for what? And
The envelope system, Josh.
but with the public, I think it's hard to change horses midstream,
But can't there be elements that are one thing, like, I think we've done that before, where there was an element of a project that,
Oh, the
You did that with the
sidewalks at
library.
Thrasher too.
You did that with the library.
Yeah.
There was, when we made changes, Mary Beth isn't here right now. I think there she is. So Mary Beth, on the library, when we did the drive-through at the front of the library, I think that came out of transportation because it really had nothing to do with the structure of the library. So you can do some elements.
Okay.
And if you had, for example, wanted to add to the Greenway, some recreation area at certain segments along the way, then, that might be, nothing to do with transportation, but a recreation improvement.
well, from some of the presentations that we've had about the Greenway, a lot of it was about stream renewal and beautification. So while you were putting in a multi-use path along the stream, you were also doing a lot of renovation to the area.
And you could use stormwater for that, for example.
Yeah.
The reason just tonight, I mean, Chief just told us we have millions of dollars in transportation items that are, that we've asked for them to identify, and they've come back and said, well, you got $1 million.
That's above the 17 million in resurfacing.
But,
I mean,
but in
so-
terms of, I'm sorry, in
Okay.
terms of like, the perceived value back to our citizens, the Parks and Recreation is some of the money that they perceive the most value from. The other stuff is just as important, but not as sexy. And 6 years is a long time, and we have a lot of things in our parks that are going to be aged out by then or before then.
I don't
So.
think anything in our parks will be aged out by then. That's 6 years.
So I see where you're coming from, Councilman Bear, and I agree with you that citizens, you can see the parks, you can see the recreation stuff, you can see that. So it's very visible. But I think Andrew made a good point here. We can fund that in our budgetary cycle.
Yeah.
And then we're taking a conscious effort to pick what we want to pick and do how we want to do it and get quotes from that versus using SPLOST to do it, right? Because what I see this as, and maybe I'm a novice here, but I see this as just setting a groundway for additional funds to slap on top of what we still got to do as council. And I look at Parks and Rec, something that, like you said, is very visible. I'd love to be able to take the opportunity and say, that's not a part of SPLOST. That's council's direction to make your park better, or to add a park here, or do this here. So I can see us reducing it from SPLOST, and let's have a lot more conversation in our budgetary cycle about it. Again, we're only setting these temporary percentages based on city manager until we get the document that says we're locked in. But I think we should have a lot more conversation as a body about being intentional about how we improve our parks, or upgrade our parks, or expand our parks in recreation. And I think we need to do a little bit more with recreation, but again, where I want to do things in recreation seem to be operational and not capital expense again. So I see that as, I would rather fund that from being the intentionality of what we do in our budgetary cycle, and push really hard for the rest of my council to support me, and support maybe you and Andrew as well, on in the budgetary cycle selecting project by project by project versus saying, here's a bucket of money we can't move, because we can automatically identify how to spend every dime of the transportation right now.
Yeah, I haven't heard, I've heard admin building, I've heard cultural arts building, I've heard Beaver Room Greenway, which is stormwater or transportation. No one's giving me a concrete way that we're gonna spend $4.77 million on park shit.
Oh, I can get you a
I
list.
know you can.
Articles going to need to be redredged, and that's $500,000 right there,
Okay.
easy.
If we split that in half, we still have 200.
Well, yeah, but I can keep on going.
Well, I think ping pong tables cost like 1.7 million.
At least, if you want the high quality ones.
Absolutely. We'll debate it more at our other meeting, but I just agree with Matt. As projects come up in the parks and green space that are capital, they're more likely to be minor capital instead of large capital. And as such, I mean, we just know this bird in hand, we've got transportation, admin stuff, it's gonna take all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I look at.
We get to spend this, we get to identify our values by spending this, and we're lucky to be able to do that. And we have to get it right.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, I look at the library, right? And we just talked about in this continuation of this meeting, what it costs to make things to the Norcross standard in terms of, right? So it's not cheap, so I'm aware of it, but I like to see those things, and I think our citizens like to see those things and like to hear us say, yes, we approve that, versus, oh, it's just a part of SPLOST. I know we do the same thing, we're approving it, but I just feel like it's more intentional when we do it ourselves. But we can have a serious conversation. I think we need to have a serious conversation about our vision as council to support things like Parks and Recreation, both capital as well as operational. Because I think just making a park, a passive park, is X, but I want to see more activity in the parks and more activities around the parks, and that's operational. And I see that as a difference in expense that we're going to have going forward. That's just where I see us transitioning as a council, because we've got some really good meat, and how do we transition as a council to, how do we activate that meat, or activate what we have. I see that as a big portion of what we do, but I do think we're gonna, I may disagree with Andrew a little bit. I think in 6 years, we're definitely gonna do some upgrades on some of our parks, but I think we can be intentional about that in the budgetary cycle. And that's why I may be different from a SPOS for budgetary. I just wanted to explain that.
So just to clarify, you may not have to lock this in till June, but for me, if you don't have enough discussion about this and start to come to a tentative conclusion, knowing that you might be able to revisit it as you get more information, the worst thing is to run out of time and arbitrarily have to come up with a number without having the discussion. So
Yeah,
I just want to remind you, I'm trying to get you to lock into a number, but there's nothing that says that you couldn't come back a month later and say, look, the county still hasn't, called for, the last, piece of information, and, but for something that's this material to the city, the sooner that you start to coalesce around.
Yeah, I mean, for me, 50 to 55% transportation, 30 to 35% administrative, and whatever the delta is in parks, I would be fine with that. Because I am seeing a heavy shift towards transportation. And I think our citizens maybe previously, and I don't want to speak for all citizens, but I think previously they saw a need for parks. They saw a need for that kind of growth. And I think the council before me, which is really the three of you guys that are here tonight, have done a tremendous job of putting your money where your mouth is in terms of getting these approvals to make this a beautiful city. And now it's time to deal with the next step in that is the infrastructure, to revisit that infrastructure that made those parks possible, is to revisit that, and how do we safely get people to parks, and how do we keep people into the city and safe. And when we talked about all that, I think that's where we've got to shift to a little bit. So I would be more supportive of that 50 to 55. Again, you heard the numbers again. So again, when we have this conversation Monday, I would love to hear from Councilwoman Beckles as well as Council Member Gaynor on what their thoughts are. But I think we heard tonight that where we stand on this right now.
It's so frustrating, it's so loosey-goosey, it's like, well, we think this, we think that. It's like, I wish we just had a list, a menu of items, like this is gonna cost this is gonna cost that, and these are our items, make the bucket out of it.
Yeah. It's hard because even if you had that, we already know the costs are gonna be.
So, yeah, on that point, I live near an intersection that I benefit from that was listed as a $500,000 intersection, cost $1.4 million. There were two other intersections in that same timeline that were all $500,000, and they all came in between 1.1 and 1.4. So that's our challenge. But you're right. I mean, having a scale helps. If we're lucky, the county's number is really conservative, and you take in more money because the cost will go up. But I think that they're pretty conservative with their estimation of sales tax growth, which is good because you'll need the extra money.
But conversely, you do need some flexibility with these percentages in case you want to move some dollars from one to the other. Because there are some blended activities like transportation and parks, and there are some blended activities.
And we've done that.
Yeah. You don't want to leave any money in the pot. Okay, looks like that was the last agenda item.
Mayor, may I ask one more question?
Yes, go ahead.
Eric, could you potentially get us a list of what in SPLOS is left from previous SPLOSes?
Trying to get there.
Okay.
Trying to get there.
Okay.
I'm with you.
It seemed like up till 2 years ago, we still had 2009 SPLOS.
Well, we do. We have 2009 SPLOS, we have 2014 SPLOS, then we have 2017. 2017 is a little complicated by the fact that you did a bond.
Right.
And some projects got paid out of SPLOS, some projects got paid out of the bond. And so we have to kind of clean
Baldwin Norcross.
that up a little bit.
Yeah, I think at some point having that
We have
number.
another year of revenue coming in that we're estimating,
Right.
but it's coming in over what was assumed.
Right. Having that number before we lock in a number may help facilitate a lot of these conversations. If there's parks money there or there's transportation money there that we know that is identified there, we might can scale back on one of these categories because we already have identified there's a huge bucket still there that we haven't used, and we're just shifting the money forward. I'm not saying which way we'd go, but we'd have to understand what that is, so.
I think the area where I have assurance that we know we have extra money is parking, because the library is done, and that was a parking project because of the fact that we had.
We labeled it as such.
Component of that, and so I think our South Peachtree parking, we're waiting for Chance for Paul to come on board and look at those numbers, but I think that's one where we have, once we know that we've paid the last dollar to the library, 40% of the money coming in for the next year is lost, dedicated to parking, so we'll probably have more parking money than in the short term you'll figure out how to spend it unless you want to do a garage, and then we'll spend a whole bunch more.
Gotcha, thank you.
I would also recommend that council revisits the comp plan, because there's a lot of citizen input there. And if you want to know what their leanings are, you can certainly see it in that comp plan. We had a lot of citizen participation. Okay, that's all we have on the agenda tonight. Do we have any exec issues to cover?
I don't have anything.
Oh, I thought you were getting up to come to the podium. Okay, council, you have anything?
Do we have any real estate, legal or personnel? I don't think so.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a
Second.
motion on the floor and a second to adjourn. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all for being here. So you have to turn this off. How you figure this out? Turn it off.
The only good thing about the spot,
But
silver lining in my life is instead of ordering new stuff.
Transportation is very, very expensive.
No, it's not what we wanted to do.
I mean, you try to compare that to Parks and Rec and so forth, you're not even close. You think about your intersection, going up 4 times.
And where we do have,
You can't get enough transportation money. I've been watching this.
you know, I work at a betting company, so probably, you guys might pay higher than we do. So, and. Yeah, I mean, we went from guys with commercial rates. But they'll do it, if y'all, broke down, they'll do it. But no, not air conditioners. So then we have a couple expensive to buy air conditioners. So it's, cause these factories don't have air, so they're necessary air. No, I mean, like, do you do, with our tree here, what is it, the uniqueness, is it all buttoned up from that standpoint, is it accepted on?